Dear John and Nick, I don't usually address you together, but I only have 4 tapes. I want to tell you about one of the peak experiences of my life that happened on January 5th, this last Thursday. It's the start of a revolution, and I want to record it so you'll have it. On Thursday, I gave a 3-hour presentation to the Governor's Committee on Community Control and House Arrest, on which I am serving. The Commissioner of Correction and his staff were there also, and it was in Stowe, Vermont. We were preparing for a meeting with Governor Cunin, which is going to be happening in the latter part of this month. What I presented was a strategy for solution of the prison problem in Vermont. It's a problem of overcrowding, where they're having to put people up in libraries and gyms. They don't have enough space, and they don't have enough. They're taking so much of the energy is going into taking care of this thing, overcrowding, that they don't have any time to work on education and rehabilitation. So what I did was to list the 6 problems which are behind that problem of overcrowding, the really basic societal problems that are the cause of this overcrowding. For the presentation, I drew together all of the work that I've done in the last 20 years and brought it into focus on this strategy. The presentation went extremely well. I am so enthusiastic and glad. It was very well received. It was just a tremendous experience. All of the people there have come out of the meeting all charged up to make it happen. The company that I'm forming with 2 ex-Polaroid vice presidents and my colleague at Polaroid, who has been working with me on the Epigenetic Rules, is going to be getting a contract from the Department of Correction to teach the Epigenetic Rules and to teach the applications of them, and to help the state of Vermont develop a strategy that will make use of these rules. The company that my 3 colleagues and I are forming is going to be called the BrainWorks. That's the idea of using a more accurate understanding of human nature to apply to problems. It's a name that Ted Page came up with after I told him about the Epigenetic Rules. When I was preparing for the meeting on Wednesday up in my study, it was a gorgeous, clear day, and I was working on a chart which drew everything together into a kind of an image of how it all fitted, a kind of a comprehensive look at the whole strategy. And I was printing this up on a big 2x3 foot chart, and I got it all finished, and I said, wow, this is great. And I took the whole easel with the chart and rushed downstairs and put it by the window, by the dining room table, with the full light of the sun pouring in on the whole chart. And then I said, I gotta go get the picture of the Earth. It's in my study. It's the one that Arnold Evans took back in 1972 on October 2nd from the Apollo 17 spaceship that was headed towards the moon. He put his camera up to the window, his 35 millimeter camera up to the window, and he took this picture which is the only fully lighted picture of the Earth in existence. The sun was shining just right, and it caught the whole Earth. So I went up and got the picture from my study, and I brought it down and I mounted it just below this chart. And then I took about 12 of these pictures. Then on Thursday, at the high point of the presentation, I said, okay, you women and men have been great students today, and I'm going to give you a diploma. And I gave each of them a print of this picture, Polaroid print of this picture, the chart and the picture that Ron Evans had taken. Now, I want to tell you about all the things that I brought into the presentation. I brought in the thinking that had come from that 6,000 person conference up in Toronto on the first global conference on the future, and I brought in the thinking from the Forum on Aging in Lexington. I brought in the thinking from the work that we had done in Westmore this summer on the future of Westmore. And then I brought in the work that I had done with Tom Sheridan at MIT on the electronic feedback device, with the choices that people would like to make more fully. If they have the choice of making them, they would like to make them more fully. So the chart that I ended up with has a list of Vermont's goals in the second column in from the left, and a list of great goals of the human race in the left-hand column, and personal goals from this work that I did at MIT in the third column over from the left. And then the column on the right is a list of goals for the criminal justice system and the prisons. So I tied together all of those four categories of the future. Great goals of the human race had come from the Toronto conference. Vermont planning goals had come from a commission that the governor of Vermont had set up last year. We used them this summer in Westmore as a frame of reference for the thinking about what do we want Westmore to be 20 or so years from now. And the personal goals were the ones that came from the MIT work. I worked with a whole bunch of groups, different kinds of groups. We all felt so great at the end of that meeting. There was enthusiasm, there was an intensity, there was a feeling of competence and excitement and aliveness and curiosity, and we are ready to meet with the governor. I must tell you a story about what happened to me when I got up on Thursday morning and started over to Stowe. On Wednesday evening, I had some concerns about the truck. Your mother's away down taking care of Abigail, so I didn't have the Mercury. Though I started up the truck and I drove it out into the yard and circled around for about 5 minutes to get the temperature up to normal. And it was working all right. It leveled off, and it was fine. I brought it into the garage again, and then Thursday morning, I started up and went over, and just as I got into Orleans, I noticed that the temperature was way up. I pulled into the BP station there in Orleans, and I said, I got to get over to Stowe, and this thing is starting to give me trouble. What can you do? So this wonderful mechanic, whose name is Ross Guay, G-U-A-Y, he's a French name, he started to work on it, and it was boiling over, and he couldn't find out what the problem was, and he worked and worked. And finally I said, I've got to get over to Stowe. And what, can you loan me a car? And he said, how important it is it for you to get there? And I said, it is very important that I get there, as I'm working on this governor's committee and I'm giving a presentation. And he said, okay, I'll call my wife and we'll ask her if you can borrow her car. So he called his wife, and she wasn't there. She works at the furniture factory in Orleans. She wasn't there available at the time, but she called back about 3 minutes later. And he said, honey, this guy needs to get over to Stowe, and would you loan him your car? And she said, yes. And he said, thanks, honey. So I transferred the easel and the podium and all of the papers into her car, and off I went. And it was a snow-covered road because it had dusted that night. And I never drove so carefully in my life on those curves, on those mountain roads up over Lowell Mountain. And I got there 5 minutes before the meeting was going to be starting. At the end of the day, I got the car back to the guy in Orleans, and I just told him it was so wonderful what he had done for me and how important it had been. So I guess one of the things I'm telling you two people is that there's something in the universe that's on my side and helping me to make this thing happen, and it feels good. I'll talk some more about this with each of you when I see you. Here's a copy of the photograph that I took. I'll tell you again, just as I did tell you at the time that I was giving the testimony on the Polaroid Kodak trial, that I thought about each one of you sons individually, one at a time, as I prepared for this thing, and you were with me all the time that I was giving this, and that was important to me. Thank you. You're great people, and I love you very much.